All right, we're up to part 11 of the 12 parts in the series. As the author says in the last chapter, we saved movie information to the database as we were not validating the user. As Chris mentioned, if you put 0 in, for example, for the year, it took it. So as it says, there is a possibility of incorrect data being saved to the database. We probably talked about this a year ago, but it bears repeating. The author says here there's 2 types of validation that you can use when you validate data. Most of the time, both types will be used. Not only that, you might do the exact same validation you did on the client, you might do the exact same thing on the server. And the reason for that is it's possible for a person to disable JavaScript. So even though you might have validation put in there in your JavaScript, if they've disabled it, it's not going to run anyway. So that's quite often why you put the same thing on the server side. And I know we've talked about this before, but again, it does bear repeating. The reason that you do client-side validation, imagine that I was filling out a form, and I'm filling it out for Amazon. It's a fairly simple form. First name, last name, email address, phone number, let's just say. All right, 4 fields. And they put validation in there, or they don't put validation in there. So let's say there's no client-side validation, and I leave one of the required fields empty. What happens? If you don't understand what I'm saying this. I've got a form, and it asks for my first name, my last name. It wouldn't look like this, it would look a lot nicer. My email, and let's just say my cell phone number. It's got this. And over here it's got a little asterisk saying all these fields are required. Okay? So I run it, and I put in my first name, I put in my last name, I put in some email address, but I leave the cell phone off. And now I click, there's a submit button or something down here. What happens? What happens? If I try to submit a form to a server and I do not put in all of the required fields, I stay right where I am. Would you agree with that? The reason you stay right where you are is because there's client-side validation. If there was not client-side validation, it would send a wrong form out to a server. The server would have to run the same kind of validation on it to find out that it was bad, and it would send it back to the client again. That's a waste of server time, server resources, and it's wrong. Not only that, sometimes when you send stuff to a server, it may not come back right away, or you may not get a response right away. You probably have had that happen to you at some time or other. You know, you click a submit button, and sometimes it'll say, form successfully submitted. Other times it might take a while, and it says it, depending on how busy the server is or whatever. What I'm getting to is, if I do this and I don't have client-side validation, and it sends it out to the server, and it takes a little while before I get an answer back, all right, if this is an e-commerce site, I might get ticked off and just say, screw it. Now that place has potentially lost money. That's why you must validate on both the client side and the server side, even if it means you are repeating some of the same tests on both. People will take that. All right, and why will they take that? Because hey, we're doing it for security. People hear security, they're willing to do almost anything. All right. So when they talk about server-side validation, I basically just went over the stuff that really matters the most with you, okay? And client side, we did talk about it. All right. So again, in most web applications, you'll try to validate on the client side. Now, the good news when you do this, okay, when you do this, if you look up on the screen here, and I go back to here, and I go down to my scripts folder, look what we already have. We've already got some jQuery that's in there, all right, that'll do some validation automatically for us on the client side. All right. Okay, so validation is the process of comparing the entered data to what's expected. So first we need to define what correct data is. What is the expected format? So here's an example. Now, don't worry about typing this in, but I want you to look at this. I want you to understand 2 or 3 things that are in here. First thing, anytime you're going to start telling the system that we're putting restrictions on the data, you have to put that using statement in at the top. These things that you see inside of here that are in the brackets, they're called data annotations. So in order to be able to use them, we need a using statement that brings in system.componentModel.data annotations. This is one of those things, if I were to put all this in and I were to take that line and leave it out, I'd get some red stuff under here. And if I went in and I clicked on the light bulb, it would say, the first option it would say is, do you want to include the using statement, the one that's in blue? So if you do forget it, you'll be able to put it in anyway. But what do we have here? Well, there's no restrictions on an ID field. That doesn't make any sense. But notice what we have here. We're saying that the maximum length of our title is 100 characters. If we exceed 100 characters, this message is going to print off to the side. Does that make sense? Now, they don't show it here, but there's also a min length. I think they should have said that because I've never tried it, but I don't know if you left it blank if it would take it or not. See what I'm saying? All right. And even, I guess it'd be possible to have a movie called I or or whatever, but probably you want a minimum length. They don't show it on here, but I'm just saying, typically that would be a good idea. So this right here, okay, what will happen with that is if you, I guess that is, it's a required field. So if you do leave it blank, you put nothing in there, all right, it'll come back and say title of the movie is required. Okay, so we don't need a minimum length. This is if this will fire here, this error message, if you exceed 100 characters. So we have 2 different data annotations in there. All right. There's one they're not showing here. I want to show it to you. All right. And just so you see it. Okay, I'm just going to grab this stuff. I'm not going to put it into the program. I'm just going to grab it and just throw it into Notepad. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to show you that this is oftentimes used. All right. So what people, a lot of times you'll see this. That means that field is a primary key. All right. And there's another one that we'll get into, we just haven't gotten that far yet, that you can use to say that what you're using is a table. All right. I'm not going to get into it right now. All right. So we've got the 2 annotations here for our title, and then here we have it for our year. Now, a couple things. Notice what they have in here. They say the release year is required. The release year must be between these 2 years. That'll work okay for right now, unless we want to put a movie in. Let's say there's going to be a new Batman movie, but it's not coming out till 2022. So we want to put it into the system. Right now, it's not going to take that. So there's ways that you can do this. What they're doing is they're using a range, so they're giving you a minimum and a maximum. But it would be possible, just so you know. For example, we could do this. We could come up and have some code that we wrote probably up here someplace, way at the top, where we could figure out, we could go grab the current year, and we could add 10 to it, and say that the release date must be between 1900 and 10 plus the current year. See what I'm saying? The reason that that's important is, as soon as you come to 2021, you better remember to change that. But doing it that other way, which would involve some code on your part, but not much, just you can literally just create a date field and type date and grab just the year. Then add 10 to it, boom, that becomes your maximum. That would be a better way to do it. That's not the way the author did it here, but I'm just telling you that would have been a better way of doing it. All right. So what you can do, yeah, you can go into the movie model, all right, movies.cs, put that line at the top, all right, and in your movies, you can change what's in there. So let me just show you what I mean. Let's grab this. Okay, I'm going to go into movie.cs right here, and at the top, I'm going to add my using system.component model. It's gray because I haven't put any of the annotations in yet. All right. Then I'm going to come back to here. I'm going to grab all of this, copy it to the clipboard, go back here to my movies, remove these 3 lines, and replace them with those. I guess we didn't have to remove the first one. That didn't change. But the rest of them. You should not see any errors in there when you do that. Does everybody in here understand what these annotations are doing? All right. I mean, it's very important that you do. So the author says if you've never used them before, they might look scary. They're not. I just explained to you that you need this file because that's where they're defined. There are a lot of them. Okay? I have shown you this before. I'm going to show it again to you right now. If you go out to, what is it? Not Microsoft.com. MSDN.Microsoft.com. Microsoft.com. That's the Microsoft Developer Network. If I go out there and I search in here for ASP.NET data annotations, all right, and eventually, hopefully, it comes up. Validation, well, that's a thing on it, but somewhere in here, they list all of the different annotations. Currency, credit card, etc. All right, so there's a lot of stuff built in here. Did you ever see that? Did you ever notice it? That, for instance, and I don't know what they are, but I think MasterCard numbers all start with the first 4 numbers. I think American Express cards do too, etc. You can put in annotations like that. So if the person attempts to enter in a credit card number and they make a mistake, you don't know if the number's valid or not, but you can tell whether the format is correct or not. And that's maybe the most important thing I've said. Not that you have to look up here, but please listen. When you do a data annotation, what you're doing is you're checking to make sure the person entered something in the right format. You don't know if what they put in is valid. If you know, it's the old joke that, you know, I hope this doesn't sound sexist, but a guy meets a girl in a bar, asks for her number, and she gives him, you know, a number that's non-existent. It still looks like a valid phone number, right? All right, that kind of an idea. So when we put these in, all we're doing is we're making sure you're putting it in the right format. I know my wife goes shopping a lot to stores where they'll ask for her home phone number. If she doesn't feel like giving it, she makes one up. All right? And all they know is, oh, that's the right format. You know, she gives them an area code and 7 numbers. All right. So he goes in here and he explains what all this stuff is. Says, let's take the data annotations and let's describe them. I don't think there's any more that we haven't already covered in here. All right. So notice what it says. If you run the application after making the above changes, you're going to get an error. Can somebody take a wild guess as to why you're going to get an error? Don't look at the error message. That has nothing to do with it. I have a question for you. Does your code match now what's in the database? I'm asking you that question. Does your code match what's in the database? And if you said yes, you're wrong. Remember, before we said the size of those fields was like n varchar max. We don't want that. We don't want it to be like that anymore. So what we have is we've got a discrepancy between what's in the database and what's in our code. All right? So we've got to fix that discrepancy. That's what they're talking about right here. So the author says there's a mismatch between the model and the database. And since the field is required, it's not going to, putting not null or whatever in there is not going to handle it. So it says by convention, types such as int, double, etc. would become not null automatically. That's why you got that 0, etc. So this is what I just mentioned to you. Please look up on the screen. We said we just came in and changed the size of the title to a maximum of 100. Look what it is right now. Max, I think I said this before, I believe that's 65,536. That's not 100. And now that we put data annotations, these two are not in sync with one another anymore. So we have to fix that. So it says, after adding data annotations, the entity framework expects the database structure will have the following properties. All right? So we have to, just the big thing, it assumes the title is not null, where right now the null thing was checked. All right? And it assumes the maximum length is 100. So it says we can use the database migrations of the entity framework to sync this up. All right? It's what we have to do is first enable database migrations. What does that mean? We're going to have to go back to that package manager, and we're going to have to type in basically enable database migrations. Then we're going to have to, as it says, update the database per the latest. Let's see if we can do that. All right? So enabling database migrations. What you want to do is you want to come in here, you want to click Tools, you want to go to your NuGet Package Manager. This one you have to do through the console. So you want to do Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and you want to go to the console, which again is going to be down here. There it is, PM. You got that down here. You might have to drag it up or down to see it, but it should be there once you do that. All right. Then you want to type this in. Now, before you do, let's look at what it says. All right. It says execute the command enable minus migrations, no blank space, followed by a blank space, minus enable automatic migrations. We are enabling automatic migrations so that the entity framework will take care of future changes for us. So what you should type in there that may be a little bit hard to read is this. So under your package manager, that's what you should type in. If you would do that now, please. And I'll do the same once everybody's got it done. Now, I don't know. I can't even see more than half of your screens. I can see Evan's, but I can't see, if I look hard enough, I can maybe see your two, but I don't know if people are having problems with this, if it's making any sense at all. I don't know if you think I'm going too fast. I will tell you, I want to go super slow in chapters 7 to 13 when we build that sports store project. Why? Because something's going to happen. You're going to forget to type in something. You're going to forget to add something. And now you'll be, mine doesn't work, and I have no idea why. All right? And I'm not saying I'm going to be able to solve the problem and figure out why. We'll have to backtrack to see if we can get it. Did anybody run that and get an error message? I should still be able to run it here, and I don't think I'll get an error message. All right. So this you should only have to run once. Excuse me, to my knowledge, you should only have to run this once because it's turning it on. So it's on now. You know, even if you save the project, get out and get back in again, it should still be enabled. All right. So put that in. Didn't get any errors. That's a good start. Now, look on the screen, please. If you look over here, I'm going to close some of this stuff that's open. I'm going to close this. When we did this, you may or may not have noticed, but when we did this, it made a new folder called Migrations. Every time you come in and you make changes to the database or you make changes to the schema of the database, all right, almost every time, if not every time, you're going to have to basically run another command we haven't done yet that's called update database. When you do this, what you're going to find in your migrations, right now we only have a configuration file. If I open up that configuration file, if you look on the screen, the key thing is going to be in here. You notice how this is all commented out? This is where you can put your initial data if you want to. That's where you seed the database with your initial data. All right? But after we do and go and seed that and we run it again, look on the screen again, please. What you're going to notice is there's going to be another file in here. Every time you update the database, in the migrations file, it makes an updated file. It looks ugly as hell because it's got a timestamp on it. It lets you know the date it was created, the time it was created, and you give it a name. And the name has to be different every time. I mean, you can call it update 1, update 2, update. You can do that. All right, but it's kind of like if you remember in Git, when you had to put a message in there, all right, to tell what you were doing, and the message should have said like initial commit or made these changes. It should be the same kind of way here. All right, so it says here, you need to tell the entity framework to update the database to give it your latest changes. So the next thing to type into the package manager is going to be update database. Just like that. You've already run this one. Don't run this one again. You should be able to just say update minus database. No blank spaces. Now, this is going to be good because I can almost assure you my database failed before, if you remembered that. So my guess is if I try to update something that already failed, mine's probably going to turn red. Hopefully yours did not turn red. All right, but let's take a look at what the author says. It says, when I run that command, I get an error message. It says that if you do the migrations, it will result in data loss. Why? Because the system has no way of knowing if there's any data in there. What if you already had a title that exceeded 100 characters? It's telling you you're going to lose anything after those first 100 characters. All right? So the author says, well, yeah, that's true. So we've got 2 or 3 ways that we can handle this. All right? It says And EF is giving us a few options. I chose the set auto migration data loss allowed property to true. All right. This means that if we migrate and there's data loss, we're saying we know there's a data loss. All right. It says we have added the following line of code in configuration class construction in here. What does that mean? That means you want to take this line of code, this line, and again, I'll put it in there so you can all see it. That line right there. Okay? You want to take that line. Did it have a semicolon that I left out or not? I don't remember. Yes, I did. I'm sorry. So, with a semicolon. You want to just, right now, this line that's right here, you want to take it and you want to add it to that migrations configuration file if it's not already in there. All right? Mine's already in there. Yours might already be in there. No, I'm sorry, that's the migrations enabled. So what we want to add underneath that is data loss allowed is true. See this? So you'll have these two lines with a semicolon. And this says, hey, entity framework, you take care of the stuff behind the scenes. I don't want to handle that. But if I lose any data, rather than failing, I'm telling you it's okay. And when you think about it, it would be okay anyway. Because with the database, all right, if we actually went in and manually just changed the database, we're going to get an error message if we have any titles in that database that are over 100 characters. And we try to use that record, we're going to get an error anyway. All right? So we want to add that, like they show right here. It says, when you execute update database, so you've got to run this again. So you've got to go back and one more time run the update database command again. Notice since it's in the package manager, there is no semicolon at the end. All right? And ideally, once you run the update database command again, as the author says, notice what's happened. If you go back and you check your table, it's changed this. Here, let's just look at it up here. This is what it looked like. Where is it? Title. nvarchar max null. Everybody see this? What we just told it to do was change this. nvarchar max null. We told it to change it to nvarchar 100 not null. All right? We're handling the year through our annotation. We're not handling the year by changing the database. And ints and int. All right? Okay, so it says, we're almost done with this lesson. It says, now we need to check whether the user has entered values in the expected format or range. All right? So it says the controller class has a property called model state valid. The bottom line is this. What you want to do is you want to change your post so it looks like this. Before you do it, let's talk about what's going on in there, rather than you just willy-nilly putting in code. All right? The key line is this line right here. This goes through everything that you put in, and it says only do the stuff below, create the new record, save it, only do that if all the fields were validated. All right? And then go back to the index. If this fails, notice where we're going. Return view, movie from view. We're going to return right back to where they were because they probably made a mistake and we're going to let them fix it. So go back up into your movies controller, please. In your movies controller, find your HTTP post add method and change it to this. All right? I have no idea if we're going to get this done. We should. I have no idea if what time it's going to be, but I have been told, make sure you keep them there the entire time after day one. Okay? I finished my class this morning at 11:30, so I told them, let's just go on and practice what we did today. So one of the students in there promptly fell asleep. All right? As it says, we are verifying the model state in the add action method using the model state .isValid property. If it's valid, we know the record had good stuff in it, so to speak, so we're saving the data to the database. Otherwise, we're returning to that same view to give them another chance to do the same thing. It says we have to make just one more change. We have to tell the view to show the error messages. All right? It says add HTML.validation message 4 is an HTML helper method, which is nice because what it does is it puts, I don't remember if it puts the errors, I think it's to the right of the field. If not, it's underneath, and it makes them red so they stand out. All right. So it says the complete Razor code is attached below. Well, in other words, we're going to have to go back into the add view. You're going to have to find where all this stuff is and put it in there. So let's look at it or for it. So we're going to come in here. We're going to go into our views, find our add view. All right. And again, look in here. Div class equal form group. All right, so that's the beginning div. That's the ending div. We got another one. So I think there were two in here. Whoops. Wow, that's neat. Two in here previously. So there's one and there's one. So I think we have to change those two things because that's our title, etc. I believe that's what we have to change to this. All right. And if you do that, they say to run the application again. All right. And notice they put in 3000. That worked. Year of release should be between 1900 and 2020. That's good. It says everything's fine, but there's a problem here. It says, why do we need to go for server if the user did not enter a title for year? Okay. It says we can find out at the client and ourselves. So what we're going to have to do, and we'll do this in just a second, is we have to add this. We have to tell the system, hey, we got jQuery. Would you please turn it on? Yours may already be turned on, but I'll show you in just a couple minutes where you turn it on. So like I said, grab this code that's right here, these 15 lines. All right. Copy them to the clipboard. Come back to here and change these lines that are right here in our add.cshtml to these. Now I put them in. It gave me no errors, which is always a good sign. Do not remove, because that's the button at the bottom. You want to replace what was in here, these two form groups, all right, the one for the title, the other one for the year. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. They ask you a question just out of curiosity. How many people in here, and if it's none, that's fine. How many people in here actually went out and bought the book? A hard copy of the book. Okay. The reason I say that, you may have it a lot better than people who didn't. And what I mean is, imagine that we're sitting there, we're working on that sports store project. You'll have your book in front of you. The other people will have to keep going to the PDF online, finding whatever they want, and then going to the book. You're going to want to make sure, even if you have the book, you're going to want to bring up the PDF too. For the same reason we're doing it here, unless you really love typing in code, and you never make errors when you type in code. All right? It's going to be much easier to do a lot of copying and pasting. But you won't have to be constantly going back and forth. All right? hopefully, it says now save it, run the application again, put in an invalid value. Look on the screen, please. There's 3 possible bad values here, correct? Number 1 is you put nothing in for the title. Remember that field now says not null? So you put nothing in there. That should generate an error. Putting nothing in for the year should also generate an error. Putting in a value that's either less than 1900 or greater than 2020 should generate a third error. If you don't do that, all right, if you put in, for example, they got invalid movie. Let's just say you put in there, I don't know, Star Wars, and let's say it came out in 1974, and you click Add Movie, that should all be valid. So the model state that is valid should succeed. So next, what we have to do is this. We have to go back to the package manager, and we have to put in this. Better make it smaller, I guess. Install -package space Microsoft.jQuery.unobtrusive validation. By default, you may not realize this, every bit of validation you've been doing so far, you've been doing on the server. All right? You haven't been doing it on the client. This tells us we want to be able to use the client. All right? Again, you type that right in at the package manager. I believe you can try it if you want, but I believe this is totally, to my knowledge, that's totally case insensitive. So if you want to put everything in lowercase, you should be able to. All right. Now look on the screen, please. It says before you put that in, this is what your script folder looked like. After you put it in, this is what it looks like. Let's get them both on the screen here. See the difference in size? You've got in here jQuery.validate.unobtrusive.js. All right? The system will know to automatically start validating at the client because you have this stuff in there. All right. That the key thing is, remember the line of code I just showed you before, that if model state.isValid? What we've been doing previously, it was doing it after you ran the program on the server. It's like I showed you over there. It's like you already sent it. Now it's going to do it at the client side. All right, you're not going to really be able to tell a difference, all right? But just so you know, that's the way you'd want it in the, quote, real world, unquote. All right, this is something we haven't done before. This may already be done for you, okay? Okay. What you have to do, everybody, please. I'm assuming that you're caught up, and if you're not, you'll have some time in just a couple minutes. But I'm assuming everybody is. I want you to go down to the bottom of your Solution Explorer, find the web config, the one on the bottom. Junk out here. This one, not the one up here, this one down here. Open that file up, the one at the very bottom. Open up web.config. This is what it looks like. As you'd guess with the config, these are the project configurations. All right? Now, it says what we have to do then is we have to go in and add I think it's just this line, but it may be in there already. So I'm going to go and I'm going to search, at least on mine, for unobtrusive JavaScript enabled. So I'm going to go back to here, start at the top, do a Control H, put that in there. There it is. See that? Yours may be already in there. My guess is that starting in 2017, they put that in by default. I'm not sure. But I think these are the ones that they tell you that you should have in here. The version, false, true, true. And we have the version, false, true, true. So it's already in there. All right. Says now run the application, access, so put in put in movie/add. It says submit the form without entering anything. You should get those errors. You can try all the tests that we just talked about. All right? In other words, you can come in and you can test, try to make that bigger so you can read it, but it's not getting too much bigger. There. So again, you can test all three of the error conditions should be working then. All right. I mentioned this. You weren't in the class last semester, so you haven't heard this. This is my opinion for whatever it is or isn't worth. All right. And Mr. Laris here, you'd be a great person to ask because you've already taken the next class. I think this is the hardest class in the program. I don't think there's anything close to this. It's so easy to screw something up where you think, I did that, but it just doesn't work. And there are going to be times when you'll say, well, I did that, or I'll look at your code and your code looks right and it doesn't work. And what are we going to do? We're going to start looking at your error messages and we're going to type in ASP.NET error. We're going to put in that error message and we're going to try to figure it out that way. Sometimes it'll be really apparent to you, or it might be something I've seen. Sometimes it won't. All right. Think again, you may be getting a lot of breaks, but I think that this just plays with your head. So it's 3:22. Can we take a break and let's come back? Our last break. Come back, please, at 3:35.